Hello, and welcome to my second talk on the problems caused by these new streetlights. In this one I want to up the pace and talk a little more about the research, the economics, the science, by reference to various studies and online sources. I printed off a lot of notes without worrying about what order they were in. And as it happens, the very first one, it's a study by Rentokil, the pest control people, into the effectiveness of LED lights at killing insects. And their global study of insect attraction to light found that LED technology, when combined with an insect light trap, was a superior attractant in killing and capturing flies than traditional light sources. And they've developed a range of insect light traps based on this technology. The reason they work so well is that LED lights produce intense beams of UVA light that penetrate further into the surrounding environment and appear more attractive to certain insects than the lights traditional lamps produce. This is a very important point. The lights penetrate further into the surrounding environment. This is why LED lights, or the whiter lights, are such a problem. They create an astonishing amount of glare and reflected light. Certain types of bugs, apparently, reading from this report, navigate by ultraviolet light from the sun and moon. LEDs produce very little or no ultraviolet light, which makes them less visible to bugs. However, LED lights often produce shorter wavelengths of light, bluish white, cool white, which are more attractive to bugs. Therefore, Rentokil concludes, when browsing for bug-resistant LED lights, which is really what we want for streetlights, it is important to choose a bulb or fixture that emits more wavelengths that are above 550 nanometers, such as warm white, ultra-warm white, or yellow lights. So that's Rentokil's comment on the new streetlights. They're not friendly to bugs. In fact, moving on, an article in The Guardian by Damien Carrington, the environment editor, titled "Light Pollution is Key Bringer of Insect Apocalypse." Well, we all know now that we're living through an insect apocalypse and it might destroy most of life on Earth if it carries on. And light pollution is an important factor in this. Picking bits at random from the article, second paragraph, artificial light at night can affect every aspect of insects' lives, researchers have confirmed. From luring moths to their deaths around bulbs, to spotlighting insect prey for rats and toads, to obscuring the mating signals of fireflies. A group of scientists, after assessing more than 150 studies, stated, "We strongly believe artificial light at night, in combination with habitat loss, chemical pollution, invasive species and climate change, is driving insect decline. We posit that artificial light at night is another important but often overlooked bringer of the insect apocalypse." There are thought to be millions of insect species, most still unknown to science, about half of which are nocturnal. A review carried out by Brett Seymour, a behavioural ecologist at Washington University in St. Louis, notes that light has long been used deliberately by farmers to suppress insects. But as human infrastructure has expanded and the cost of lighting has fallen, light pollution has come to affect a quarter of the world's land surface. The research found that vehicle headlights pose a deadly moving hazard And this fatal attraction has been estimated to result in 100 billion insect deaths per summer in Germany. This is vehicle headlights, which of course are also being changed over to bright white LEDs. Artificial light hinders insects finding a mate in some species. And a particularly interesting point is that some insects use the polarization of light to find the water they need to breed. Light waves line up after reflecting from a smooth surface. So they become polarized, and the insects use that polarization to detect the water. But artificial light can scupper this. Mayflies, quoting from the report, mayflies live for only one day, so they come out and look for polarized light. They find it. But from asphalt, they lay their eggs there and they all die. That's a good way to knock out an entire population in 24 hours. One of the key points about these new LED lights is that they're unnatural. We've never used them before. This is a new technology. It's not a slight upgrade to the street lights, any more than 5G is a slight upgrade to 4G. These are new technologies developed in a surveillance society. The development of juvenile insects, such as field crickets, has been shown to be affected by light pollution, which changes the perceived length of the day and night. In research in New Zealand, they found that crickets spend less time foraging in light polluted areas. They don't like it. Light pollution can also tip the balance in favour of predators. Such increases in predation risk was likely to cause the rapid extinction of affected species, the researchers said. The researchers also said light pollution is particularly hard for insects to deal with. And this is because most human-caused threats to insects have natural analogues. They're something like what happens in nature anyway, such as climate change and invasive species. These things happen. And they allow for some adaptation on the part of the threatened species. But the daily cycle of light and dark has remained constant for all of evolutionary time. When that changes, there's no gradual adaptation. The effect is immediate and catastrophic. These lights have no natural analogue. They're not natural. The report says that LED lights offer hope. And this is because they can be easily tuned to avoid harmful colours and flicker rates. The key word there is can. They can be tuned. Our councils and city authorities have decided not to tune them. They've installed the cheapest, brightest, whitest lights they can find. Max Shardlow, the chief executive of the conservation charity Bug Life, has said, "The evidence that light pollution has profound and serious impacts on ecosystems is overwhelmingly strong. It is imperative that society now take substantial steps to make the environment safer for insects." He's writing this at a time when, from the top to bottom of Britain, we're doing the very opposite. I have here an article published on a site called Up. And the article goes, "Wherever LED lights are installed, they leave residents in uproar. In Llandoch, Wales, I have no idea if that's how you pronounce it. Locals have organised a petition to have their recently installed LED streetlights removed and replaced with the originals. Last year, Bath Council was forced temporarily to stop replacing the city street lamps with LEDs and hold a public consultation. So vociferous were complaints after the first 2,000 were erected. In Trafford, in Manchester, residents threatened to take their council to court if it continues with plans to replace all of its 27,000 streetlights. So what is so wrong with the new system? The author asks. Rather a lot, it turns out. All light consists of different colour combinations, and visible light falls on a rainbow-like spectrum, which extends from red to blue. Natural light combines all the colours of the spectrum, but the light given off by these LEDs is overwhelmingly blue. And this is the problem. Too much blue light suppresses our biological clock, resulting in lower quality sleep. This in turn increases the likelihood of heart disease, obesity and diabetes. It damages the immune system and leaves sufferers vulnerable to depression and anxiety. It has even been suggested that too much exposure to LED light causes blindness. Last year, a Spanish study suggested that light emitted by LED bulbs can damage cells in the retina. It's pointed out that LED lights are generally banned in art galleries because they bleach the paint on works on display. They are dangerous and potentially damaging, says Simon Nicholas, a chartered engineer who successfully campaigned to stop LED lights being erected in Trafford until further research is carried out. He says local councils have embraced this technology without looking into the health concerns. All they care about is the bottom line. I don't think that's quite true. I do think they care about surveillance. They have to, because these lights have to be suitable for surveillance. The police have to like these lights and the security services. But other than that, it does seem that all they care about is the bottom line. In my council, the engineers erected the lights, changed the lights. There was no committee procedure, democratic process, consultation, testing, nothing. Let's change the lights. Okay, job done. We've saved a lot of money. Whether they have actually saved money remains to be seen. That will all depend on how long these lights last. This article goes on. Meanwhile, those affected by council's newfound zeal for the LED bulbs are questioning just how much taxpayers' money they will ultimately save. Because the initial cost of installing LED lamps is remarkably high. Replacing Trafford's lights would cost £9.3 million. In other areas, installing LED lighting involves ripping down and replacing the entire lamp frame at a cost of about £500 a unit. Essex County Council was recently forced to halt plans to replace its lamps when it emerged that the work involved would cost £31 million. And this is the key figure here. This is the crucial figure that concerns everyone when it comes to the economics of this. All I've got is a sentence in this article here. I haven't looked into this, but I've heard the same figure repeated by other people. Even with the energy savings the lights should bring, it could take 20 years for installation costs to be recouped. Now that's worth thinking about, for two reasons. One is the councils can't afford to replace these lights, even if they conceded they were dangerous and harmful to wildlife and ugly and horrible and unpleasant and inappropriate and unfit for purpose. Even so, they can't afford to replace them. So we are stuck with them for 20 years. This undemocratic, badly thought out decision, we are going to have to suffer for 20 years. Perhaps. It might only be 15 years. Some experts predict that these lights will not last 20 years. They will need replacing beforehand. If they have to be replaced in 15 years, there's a very good chance councils will not have recouped the cost of installing the lights from the energy savings. So when councils say they've saved a lot of money, this is not true. They're hoping they've saved a lot of money. Whether they have or not remains to be seen. Simon Nicholas, who campaigned against the lights in Trafford, points out that if you were saving energy at home, would you buy a new £500 unit or just put a low wattage bulb in? Roderick Binns, a property consultant, says that residents in Chiswick could actually lose money because the unsightly lights might affect the value of their homes. The article goes on. Some say the lights may increase antisocial behaviour. Well, I'm also sure of that. I mean, after all, if you put people in prison yard surveillance lighting, you can predict the result. Studies into the effect of lighting on crime have produced mixed results. LED lamps tend to focus their light on one particular spot instead of diffusing the light evenly, as the former models did. As a result, they leave some patches of street and pavement almost entirely unlit and potentially vulnerable to criminals. I think the problem's actually worse than that. I have a friend whose mother used to walk at night regularly. Not anymore. She's frightened to do it. Under these new lights, you're continually surrounded by areas that you cannot see into. They're just pitch dark. The glare from the white lights is so great that your eyes can't adjust to the intense darkness between the pools of light. It doesn't make sense, says Les Godwin, a councillor in Prestbury, Cheshire, who is opposing the introduction of LEDs in his neighbourhood. If you have a well-lit area and you turn it into one with dark parts, that can't be good. Above all, the article goes on, what appears to have angered people is that LED lamps, like so many other modern innovations, are an ugly and potentially harmful blot on the urban landscape. Well, excuse me, but they're a much, much uglier and greater blot on the rural landscape. If a lighting engineer cannot see that these lights are ugly, unfriendly, brutal, soulless, stress-inducing and unfit for purpose, then I don't really see the point in becoming qualified as a lighting engineer. In Manchester, the lights have been nicknamed UFO lamps because of their glare. And given that some of Britain's lampposts date back to the 19th century, ripping them down in large numbers is a great loss to society. As Simon Nicholas puts it, you wouldn't rip down historic statues. It's vandalism. It's a matter for central government, he says, rather obviously. At the moment, nobody's paying attention and nobody's stopping this. It is extremely worrying, and that is why I'm part of the campaign for amber streetlights, the address of which is in the notes for this video. We can't persuade them to change the lights, they can't afford it. But we're trying to persuade them to commit themselves to sorting this problem out when the lights need replacing in 10 to 20 years. The next article, this is an article by a resident of a town called Edison in the States, and it's titled Petitions for Bright Streetlights. This week, Edison replaced the streetlights on our street, and I feel like I'm living inside a sports arena. And underneath is a comment section, and here's the local comments. This is just people's reactions to these lights as they go up. I feel bad for the nocturnal animals that live around there, confused about what time it is and being more susceptible to predation. Also my sympathies to the inhabitants of the street for the light pollution. Next comment. Hate to state the obvious, but where's a good guy with a BB gun when you need one? Or even a slingshot? Next comment. They shouldn't need to be told there is a problem if the lights are that bright. Just some common sense should work. Next comment. The lights need to be changed. I'd be miserable if that was on my street. I didn't know LEDs were that painfully brilliant. This is not a good design feature. Well, it is not a design feature, it's just an unfortunate byproduct of cheap lights. Next comment. The problem of light pollution is not only a menace to astronomers. Not only can some high-powered lights produce more carbon dioxide over a year than a modern-day diesel car produces in about 500 kilometres, but the strain on wildlife in both urban and rural locations is great. Light pollution is also an unnecessary waste of energy that eventually gets translated into a great and unnecessary cost to economies worldwide. I'm not trying here to exactly prove any points, because that would require rather a more careful scientific approach. I'm just pointing out that everybody knows what the problems with these lights are as soon as they start looking into it. It's not a difficult thing to understand. You are dealing with blue laser-generated light. The important thing is the shape of the light pattern and its colour. Next comment. This is what happens when companies forget the public welfare. Please write to the council before Santa Barbara looks like an airstrip. Next comment. Stop installing them. It's a design flaw for small, narrow residential streets. It's pure light pollution. I had one installed across the street last Friday and it has had a tremendous impact on my health and enjoyment to sit on my patio or even sleep. It's a prison light. If the city is aware of the complaints pouring in from city dwellers, then stop installing them. Go back to the drawing board and design something that is suitable for our neighbourhood streets. These lights are for commercial buildings. Next comment. It is absolutely unacceptable for our city to allow this, for so many reasons. It feels like prison lights. It disrupts animal patterns, not just the nocturnal animals. And what about the light pollution in our night sky? Let's all stand together and get our neighbourhoods back to a gentle, civilised feeling. What a good comment. How are we supposed to live in a gentle, civilised society when we light it like a lorry park? Moving on, here's an article from the New York Times about the lighting in Rome. If nothing else, the new bulbs have lit up social media, where the illumination has been compared to that in a hospital, a morgue or a cemetery. Apparently, a central figure in the drive to reverse the lighting decision has been trying to discover how the decision was taken. Illumination is atmosphere, she said emphatically. They are assassins of the beauty of Rome and of its history. And I'm quite sure she's right, if the lighting in my neighbourhood is anything to go by. Another New York Times article, an opinion piece, talking about these lights. And you'd think in New York, it's hardly a natural environment. You'd think as long as the lights were on, no one would mind too much. But apparently, the group of residents interviewed for the article have compared the nighttime environment under the new lights to a film set, a prison yard, a strip mall in outer space, and the mothership coming in for landing in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The author says, although going half blind at 58, I can read by the beam that the new lamp blasts into our front room. Once the LEDs went in, our next-door neighbour began walking her dog at night in sunglasses. Medical research has established that blue spectrum LED light disrupts sleep patterns. This is the same illumination that radiates, in smaller doses, from smartphone and computer screens, which we're advised to avoid exposing ourselves to for at least an hour before bed. So we've installed them as street lights. A New Yorker says, the tribute to The City That Never Sleeps was meant to celebrate a vibrant cultural nightlife, not a town of hollow-eyed Walking Dead insomniacs. He goes on, these lights are ugly, they're invasive, they're depressing. New York deserves better. Well, yes, we all deserve better, and we should all be standing up protesting to get something better. Action is being taken in some cities and towns, which shows that action is necessary. Among municipalities that have worked with citizens to reconcile energy savings with a more pleasing nocturnal landscape is Berlin, where, in response to an outcry over the conversion, engineers designed LEDs that imitate the qualities of gaslight. Well, brilliant. Why only Berlin? After so many complaints, the town of Davis in California sponsored a variety pack test street. They put up various lights along the street, from which residents selected not only a lower colour temperature fixture, but one with a lower wattage, thus saving the city yet more money. In an article for the Los Angeles Times from 5 years ago, an article by Eric Betts, he talks about crime. We intuitively assume that more lights means less crime. Indeed, police are often taught that, second to more police, good lighting is the best crime deterrent. Yet decades of research show that there's no scientific reason to believe that darker streets are inherently more dangerous. In one study, in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health, researchers examined 14 years of data from 62 local authorities across England and Wales, hunting for crime and traffic collision trends among agencies that had reduced the levels of lighting, trying to find the connection between lighting levels and crime and traffic problems. The researchers found no link between collisions and lighting, despite studying about 14,000 miles of roadways where streetlights were dimmed, lighted for only part of the night or shut off entirely. They also examined lighting's effect on crime and similarly found no increase in burglary, auto theft, robbery, violence or sexual assaults in areas where lighting policy had changed. Other studies back up these results. In 1998, Chicago tried to fight crime with a three-phase plan that included upgrading 175,000 streetlights, as well as lights in transit stations and alleys around the city. The city kept experimental control areas unchanged and found that crime consistently increased in both the well-lighted and the control areas. Illinois criminal justice officials concluded that strolling down a dark alley was no more dangerous than doing so in a well-lighted one. All this should make taxpayers uneasy. The article goes on to discuss various other problems. It mentions that besides the waste of money, A growing body of biological research suggests that nighttime lighting messes with the circadian rhythms of humans and other animals, wreaking havoc on everything from sleep patterns to DNA repair. Studies have shown that nighttime light exposure is a risk factor for some cancers, diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. The American Medical Association has already recommended that cities reduce light pollution, and LEDs are of particular concern. The problem is that these bright lamps increase sky glow by emitting more blue light than the older technology. And again, we're back to the point about the diffusion of the light. This light does not diffuse in the same way as the old orange sodium produced lights. This is not wide spectrum light, it's blue-white light. It poisons the night sky, and it's so intense that although the lights themselves may emit little upward light, the reflected light is orders of magnitude more damaging than the light that used to be emitted upwards by the old street lights. It points out, and we're still on the Los Angeles Times article here, the psychological loss is less measurable. When the 1994 Northridge earthquake hit, some residents called 911 to report a strange cloud hovering overhead. It was the Milky Way, the centre of our galaxy. They hadn't seen it before. And of course, under these new streetlights, observing the night sky, enjoying the night sky is, well, that is now a thing of the past. I have a 180-degree view of the horizon from the back of the house, and from one end to the other it's poisoned with glare from these lights rising up into the sky. If one's out in a lit area, you can't look up anyway without blinding yourself. But even if you can get a little bit away from the lights, it doesn't matter, the night sky is poisoned. The article asks, what happens when people grow up without stars? Do they lose their connection to the cosmos that our ancestors tracked so carefully? Well, of course. By installing these lights, we are depriving our children forever of the night sky and their connection with their world and the cosmos beyond. There's a further problem, which is that while LEDs are energy efficient, they're not very lighting efficient. And the fact that they're relatively cheap to run means that their introduction can lead to more light as cities spend the money saved on reduced electricity to buy more lighting. There is a tendency to use more of something, not less, when the price of producing and distributing the product goes down. This is known as Jevons paradox. And cities are lighting at higher levels because LED lighting makes adding new lighting a lot cheaper. The idea is that blue-white LED lighting is better at confining light to the ground so it doesn't go into the sky. But actually this is nonsense. Anyone who flies in an aeroplane knows this. The surface brightness of commercial white LEDs is now about 1/30th the surface brightness of the sun. The problem is that these lights create more glare, putting drivers and pedestrians at risk. And a lot of LED lighting does little to control the exact shape of the light output. Short-wave blue light scatters a lot further through the atmosphere than long-wavelength red light, even if it's emitted by shielded light fixtures. So replacing older technologies with white LEDs will make sky glow worse, even if the total amount of light from the fixtures stays the same. And of course it's not staying the same, it's massively increasing. My suspicion is that the reason that these lights are so bright is that they're not efficient, they're not effective. In order to penetrate in foggy and damp conditions and be effective, they have to be brighter than an orange light would be or a yellow light would be. These lights do damage. The Canadian Society of Optometrists has come out against these lights because of the damage they do to our eyesight. And this is not just about old people being irritated by them. It's about the effect on all of our eyes of having lasers pointed into them. If you're going to make people live under harsh white lighting, you're going to have more crime, more social unrest, more anxiety, more stress, more antisocial behaviour, a lot more youth crime, much more disrespect for the environment, and a much more depressed population. Individual LEDs produce more light for less electricity than most other lighting technologies. But we only benefit from carbon and cost savings if the amount of light used is the same. What seems to be happening, in line with Jevons paradox, is that the world will demand more lighting as the price of producing it decreases. Another issue is the financial and carbon cost of producing these lights, and potential environmental concerns about the lighting when it becomes obsolete. Just as we worried about the disposal of CFL light bulbs and mercury contamination, we'll have to deal with LEDs and some nasty heavy metals. This is happening now with solar panels. The earlier solar panels are now becoming tired and they need replacing. But disposing of them is a problem no one has yet properly considered. The more clever the technology we use, the harder it is to reintegrate it with our environment. The basic point is this. If you are living somewhere where these lights have been installed, and if you find them ugly and horrible, and you'd like to have something better and more friendly, then this is perfectly possible. All we need to do is persuade our councils to wait until the lights reach the end of their natural life and replace them with something suitable. We cannot force them to change the lights before then because they don't have the money. They've spent it all on installing these street lights. They can't now afford to uninstall them. The campaign for amber streetlights is recognising the realities of the situation and recognising that nothing can be done in the short term, or very little can be done in the short term. So if you want to see things change, please leave your name and email on our website. You'll get a newsletter occasionally, but not much else. But what you will get is notification when it's time to set up a proper petition at local government or national government level. Please join the campaign. Please join the International Dark Skies Association. And let's change these lights from one end of the globe to the other. There's a danger that nothing will happen if people just ignore it. Thank you for listening. Sorry it's so long, but it could have been twice as long.